So hello and a very warm welcome to the podcast for the rare cancer community. This is brought to you by RareCan, a new virtual platform aimed at making it much easier for patients to take part in research. In these podcasts, we aim to shine a spotlight on some of the barriers to progress, ignite conversations around possible solutions, and connect others who are ambitious for change and innovation in this space. I'm Debbie Binner, and I'm a campaigner for better and kinder treatments for children with cancer, and I'm a non-executive director at RareCan. Now, our topic today is perhaps one of the most difficult. It's when a child or a teenager or a young person gets cancer. And I'm joined by this fantastic panel of people today, all chosen because they've either taken their personal experience of cancer or have worked in the area to try and make things better for other people. But first of all, I'm going to ask you all to introduce yourselves to our audience. But first of all, I just want to introduce my co-host to this podcast and our doctor in the house, Professor Andy Hall. Hi,
Thanks
Andy.
very much, Debbie. Yes, my name's Andy Hall. Until 4 years ago, I was a full-time clinician scientist looking into the causes of drug resistance in children's leukemia. But I'm now dedicated full-time to making RareCan make a difference in this challenging area.
Okay, great. And so if I just, so Angela, first of all, who are you? Who are you, and a little bit about you?
Yep, so my name is Angela Polanco. My daughter Bethany was 4 years old when she was diagnosed with Wilms tumour. Unfortunately, we lost her in 2012. Since then, I've worked quite passionately and quite ferociously in the parent representative world, trying to make things better for children with cancer. We set up a charity called Bethany's Wish, and also at the moment I'm doing a PhD in cancer survivorship and pregnancy outcomes, trying to make care of pregnant survivors better.
Thank you, Angela. Thank you. Simon?
I'm Simon Davies. I'm the Executive Director of Teen Cancer America. I've been here for 7 years now, and I was previously the Chief Executive of the Teenage Cancer Trust in the UK.
And Cesare?
Yes, hi, this is Cesare Spadoni. I'm also a parent. Unfortunately, I lost my first child to cancer in 2006, my daughter Laura, at the age of 4. But I'm also a scientist. I'm a PhD scientist. I'm a molecular cell biologist. I spent all my professional career in drug discovery and development. And for me, it was really strong motivation to change the outlook for children with cancer. And I want to do something in this field. I'm the chairman of a UK-based childhood cancer charity, APOD. And I'm also the founder of a biotech company, OncoHeroes Biosciences, that is specifically focused on developing drugs for children and adolescents with cancer.
Cesare, thank you so much. Now, Angela, I want to turn to you first of all, because you said something to me that was so kind of so touching, that how important it is for the memory of your daughter, the memory of Bethany. So tell us a little bit about what she was like as a little girl.
Bethany was just amazing. She was just like everything that I wanted in a little girl. She had really long hair that was past her bottom. I always had short hair when I was younger, so I always said that if I had a daughter, I would never cut it. She was just always happy. She loved going on holidays. She just loved family, and especially when we had my middle son, Hayden, she absolutely loved spending time with him and teaching him things and taking him places. And I say even now that now he's older, she probably would have been like a little mummy to him, and kind of making sure that he wasn't kind of getting away with being naughty and keeping him in line. So yeah, she was just really kind and thoughtful.
So how old was she when she was first diagnosed with cancer?
She was 4 years old, so she'd just started school. I think she was in reception.
So tell us a little bit about what the journey was like, what happened.
Well, I think it comes as a shock to everyone, I think, when the child has cancer. I know in particular for us, we'd never even thought that children got cancer. We'd never been in that world. It was definitely nothing on our radar that suggested cancer. The only thing we really noticed was that her stomach was a little bit bloated. But my husband's from kind of an Afro-Caribbean background, so we just looked at her and was like, oh, she's just a bit stocky, or she's had a bit too much spaghetti bolognese maybe. And I remember asking my mum, and I said, oh, do you think her stomach's a little bit bloated? And she said, no, it looks fine. So kind of left it at that. And it wasn't until I was at a party with another mum from the school, and unfortunately her little boy had neuroblastoma as a child when he was 2. And I just mentioned to her off the cuff, and I just said, oh, do you think Bethany's stomach looks a bit strange or a bit funny? And she said, I don't want to scare you, but this is what happened to my little boy. And I would definitely go to the doctors and get it checked out. So we kind of walked in there expecting them just to say, no, it's fine, a bit of constipation maybe, or an allergy. And then she was sent directly to the hospital. And the only thing that they could really tell us was that there was a mass, which at that point I still didn't even connect the dots. I didn't connect the dots between a mass and cancer. I don't know whether that was just me trying to block everything out. But I just remember looking at her and just thinking, like, how can this happen? Like, how can this happen to a child? What are we going to do? And I was just trying to be strong for her and not try and cry. And yeah, it was just a difficult time.
Incredibly difficult. Now, you said just before we came on that I mean, you've set up a charity and you now kind of dedicated your professional life to kind of making things better for other people. And you said one thing that drives you, which just sends a shiver down my spine, is that if a child walked into a clinic today, and so, sorry, how long ago did Bethany die?
2012.
2012. So we're now 2021. If a child walked into a clinic today, they'd have exactly the same chances as Bethany had. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, they've developed the treatments a lot over the years, but once Wilms tumor decides to relapse, then the options are really limited, and there's only kind of one round that you've got to try and save them. And unfortunately, if it relapses after that, there's still nothing out there that can cure them. I mean, I run a parents group of Wilms tumor parents from around the world, and so often I see the same stories coming, that they've relapsed for the second time, they don't know what to do, they want to find a trial, they want to find a new drug. But yeah, the outcome is exactly the same, even after all this time.
It is horrendous. So Andy, can I just bring you in here about because this kind of, and it's the same thing happened to my daughter about in relapse, that you knew there was nothing really, and probably like Angela, I was the one that was left kind of pushing to try and find some possible treatment out there. So why haven't things changed because people know this is an issue, and in other more common cancers, they have had progress. Why is it so difficult in this area?
There's a number of reasons, and I think Angela's really highlighted a very important issue. And that is the main problem is that the numbers of people that are in this situation are mercifully very small. So which is of course good, because we wouldn't want to put anybody through what Bethany had to go through and Angela. But it does make a problem for researchers, and the problem is getting enough cases to be able to study to make firm conclusions. So that's one of the things that RareCan wants to do, is to try and help researchers to assemble enough people so we can actually look at the samples or listen to the stories that are involved to try and come up with some ideas, some research ideas. The next thing is trying to engage the interest of drug companies, which is where Cesare's company is so important, because like it or not, drug companies are centered around making money. And a drug company will be drawn towards areas where they can guarantee a large number of people will be treated. Now that is changing, because cancer is so fragmented that actually all cancers are in a sense now becoming rare cancers. So drug companies are rethinking those models. But those are the two obvious big barriers to me of why it's taken so long. Against that, of course, I mean, people do have to remember that if a child dies, it's a particularly tragic thing, not only for the damage that it causes to the family, but it's the lost years of that child as well. So it's the number of years saved, if you like, by saving a child in this situation. And I think people are now understanding the economics of that much better.
Yeah, Thank you, Andy. So Cesare, you come from a kind of, which I can't imagine put myself in your shoes, because you were a drug developer first of all. And so tell us your story.
Well, my story, well, I could probably repeat word by word what Angela said. I mean, obviously, well, as a parent, you know, Laura was really a lovely girl, very pretty, very bright, with a very strong sense of humor, I have to say. And so there was nothing really pointing to the fact that she was getting sick. You know, just we didn't really notice much. Really, something was really wrong. I mean, she had temperature for you know, it was up and down, going up and down for a week or two. We took her to the doctor. She said, "Oh, it's nothing." Sent her back. So one day, finally, we took her for an X-ray. In the X-ray, they found something. It's the usual story, and then it kind of escalated. And she was 20 minutes later, she was having a CT scan, and we found out basically she was already in a sort of metastatic stage. She had abdominal cancer. What really made it really very difficult for us is that the doctor couldn't diagnose the cancer. They couldn't tell us exactly what type of cancer Laura had. Just to give an idea, you know, talking about rare cancers, you know, we sent the samples to 4 different centers, you know, internationally, and we got 3 different diagnoses. So basically, people couldn't really decide what cancer she had, and on the basis of that, they couldn't really determine what therapy she should get. And again, mind you, this was 2005. You know, nowadays would probably be different with the you know, next generation sequencing, all the, you know, the sort of the diagnostic tools that we have right now. But basically, we decided well, the doctors decided. I'll say we because I was in medical research. You know, the doctor really took a very sympathetic view. They wanted to involve me, you know, in you know, in their decisions. I remember sitting side by side with a pediatric oncologist. We were searching PubMed for articles, you know, that are, you know, looking for, you know, sort of ideas on how to treat Laura. And finally, they decided to go for a protocol that seemed to be working fine. She was actually in remission, but she was in remission, I would say, probably for a month. And then she was still getting treatment, and then the cancer relapsed, and it went really very quickly. So obviously, it was really tough for everybody, for the family. Just to give an idea, when Laura was diagnosed, my wife was 4 months pregnant. So she had to go through the pregnancy, you know, when Laura was in the hospital. And when Laura died, my daughter that eventually was born, she was 9 months old. So anyway, so it's not a unique story. So many parents had to go through this, but because of my background, you know, when I wanted to do something for children with cancer, there was no question about it. So I'm in drug development. I want to speed up the development of better treatments, because as in the case of Angela, so it was clear to me that kids are treated with drugs that were approved 40, 50 years ago. And there is and there's a clear consensus within the pediatric oncology community. And by the way, the pediatric oncology community has done an absolute marvelous job, you know, in improving survival rates, cure rates for kids. But it's clear that we can only save more kids if we bring better, more innovative treatments to the clinic. And this is what I set out to do, you know, with my activities. You know, that I set up a foundation, and now I'm working in a biotech company. This is really, for me, the bottleneck. Now, there are different bottlenecks, and we can discuss about these later, but the bottleneck that I decided to tackle is drug development.
That's great. Thank you, Cesare. So Simon, I want to turn to you, because you have spent years and years in this area. And I know when my daughter, exactly like Angela, had relapsed, and I felt entirely on my own that I was trying to, and not a medic at all, no medical training, but got pretty good at knowing what the issues were. But I kind of just, and I'm sure you recognize it, you know, that night after night scrolling through the internet, trying to talk to people. And eventually I came across Simon, who advocated for me, because I had heard about this new drug, wanted to get this new drug, but wasn't able to. And it was like something dangled in, you know, at your worst possible time. So Simon, tell me about the years, and I mean, these stories can't be, it must be very familiar to you.
Yeah.
Tell me from your side as being a kind of campaigner in this area.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, most of the cancers, the cancers that young people get in general, as with children as well, are mostly rare, and so they're up against it from the start. And I was always interested in this area, although Teenage Cancer Trust was more of a service organisation than it was a research organisation. But I got catapulted into this fight, really, by Chloe, your daughter, and you, because I couldn't believe that we had a situation where a 17-year-old, with all her maturity and physiology being similar to any 18-year-old, couldn't get access to a drug that was being trialed in 18-year-olds plus. And I found that obviously incredibly frustrating scenario for you, but also just unbelievable. And I was, I went out, I've said this to you many times before, looking for an enemy. I figured there has to be an enemy, a provocateur who has caused this to happen. And I thought initially it was the drug company. And for all the sort of battles that we had with that particular drug company, I do understand that the restrictions and the regulations that were there for them were preventing them from being able to do anything for you. And so I came to the conclusion, and I still hold that conclusion now, that the problems really lie in there being no overarching sort of helicopter view strategy for tackling this problem. There are many blocks in many places, and everybody is fighting those particular areas. But actually what I believe is needed is a very, very strong strategic approach to tackling this issue. And I found since I've been in America that there are many of the same issues that existed in Europe and in the UK. You know, we still have a long way to go, although as Cesare has said, you know, there's been some amazing developments, and we're very happy to see that. But it's nowhere near where it should be.
Yeah, thank you. So just with my own daughter, it was that she was 17 and was unable to get on a trial because they had a lower age range of 18. And I've busted a gut for many years, along with Cesare, of trying to take this age range down. And I think that is some movement there. I think that, you know, that is it feels the age range is coming down. But like you say, Simon, it's just so many different blocks. So turning to you, Andy. If we were, I mean, I know we set up RareCan to try and match the patient to the researcher using AI. It seems like such a simple, great idea that maybe, why didn't it happen before? But, you know, that, and I felt that so acutely that I was unable to talk to the researcher. I wanted to give my data, because probably knowing it wouldn't have saved Chloe, but that it would have done something good. You know, it was just something we could do. And at that time, I was completely blocked from doing it. But so what do you think we can do, Andy, now? What are the main things that will really kind of unblock some of these barriers we're talking about?
So I think the key thing is to set up a route of communication, because I think what you're describing is that feeling of a sort of glass wall, and how do I find my way into this? This sort of research environment with these, you know, supposedly, you know, difficult to talk to and impossibly clever people who wouldn't understand what I'm asking. And on the other side of that wall, there's researchers who very much do want to do the right thing and to be doing relevant things. So in my experience, most researchers are very, very keen to talk to patients. They're often quite scared about it because they feel they don't want to be intruding on that, and it makes them feel a little uncomfortable to start off with. But it's a very rare, in my experience, researcher who's only motivated by the usual things that drive a career. Sure, they are motivated by those things, and some of those things get in the way, actually, of all the things we've been talking about. So above all, I think RareCan provides that sort of that way in which that communication, we can work together to be able to do these things. And as I say, it's a question of geography when it comes to rare cancer, because in this country, it can be St Andrews to St Ives, someone can present, and I can't do the geographical equivalent in Italy and in America off the top of my head, I'm afraid. But it's that business of finding people and who are willing and interested in taking part. So we're asking people to put their hand up and say, look, I'm the sort of person, I don't mind if you contact me and talk about a research project or a clinical trial. I'd be interested to find out. And then therefore researchers can get back to them and say, well, we've got a trial we want to set off at the moment. We've got a study we want to set off. Is it okay if you take part? And that, it seems such a simple thing, but that's the thing that puts researchers off going into rare cancer. They go to a PhD student goes with a fantastic idea they've just read, this new mutation, surely it'd be great to study this cancer. And their supervisor will say, I agree, but you've only got 3 years. We'll spend all of those 3 years trying to find the 5 people we need to study it. Do something on breast cancer, colon cancer, it's much easier. I could do that next week. And it's that simple thing that puts people off doing stuff which otherwise is really interesting to them.
Yeah.
So that's what RareCan, I hope, will be able to do.
Yeah. So just throwing it open now, really, because it's this idea of what Simon was talking about, because what I was and I know, Angela, we've spoken about this before, is this kind of, that so much of this world seems to be done in silos. And I was so struck that, everybody seemed to be having kind of their own, they were trying to protect their piece of work, and just a lack of collaboration. I think I can say that as a parent, because it's so really deeply made me very angry and frustrated. So this idea of this kind of, where would that strategy sit, Simon? What would that look like to make, because it is like, is this a public sector issue? Is this down for our health systems to get this? And I pushed on all the doors of that and didn't get anywhere. Or do we need the private sector to come in and really innovate here?
I don't think we can do it without the private sector. I just think there needs to be a much more, and it needs to be a global strategy, in my view. We should be taking the best of Europe and the best of America and other countries to, especially when you're talking about these low numbers. But I think it really does, we have to engage the pharmaceutical industry. We need them, they're really important. And many of them, and there are many good people in the pharmaceutical industry as well, despite some of the less colourful reputations over the past for what they've done. But that said, they need to be incentivized as well. You can't, Andy very well spoke about the commercial challenges that they have to face. Why would you invest millions in a small drug which is going to affect only a few people and would end up being very expensive? There is no commercial incentive there. So we have to make sure that there is incentivization. In fact, America has just passed a Creating Hope Reauthorization Act, which enables the pediatric voucher program, which does give incentives to pharma to do that. But it's really not enough. It has to be, for me, I would like to see organizations like the National Cancer Institute collaborating on part of a world stage about how we can develop the best for pediatric cancer, and be strategic, because it's still a bit potluck. You had a very rare disease for your daughter, Cesare, which was it's difficult to diagnose. They hadn't diagnosed it, and then finding the needle in a haystack of somebody that actually interested in doing some research about that is very difficult. We should be looking at that long list of all those rare diseases and actually saying, well, they've all got to have some attention. So let's talk about who can give it attention and how we can invest in that. Otherwise, there'll always be another rare disease that nobody's done anything about, and it's the same old drugs that they're hitting it with that they've had for 30 years. Yeah. We have to be much more strategic about it, and I think on a global level.
Thanks. So Cesare, over to you, because you work in biotech companies, and so how do you, because I think our eyes have all been on COVID, haven't they, and how quickly something has been done there. And And you can't help but kind of draw analogies of that. So could that happen? You know, why can't that happen in an area like children and, you know, young people? You know, kind of, is there anything more precious than our young people? So with the private, so why can't we get faster movement? Why?
Yeah, I think it's the comparison is very tempting, isn't it? You know, because you've seen this, you know, very, you know, impressive development, you know, with the COVID vaccine. I think it's always useful to study what happened and see what we can learn from this. I think what I would say is that one thing is to develop a vaccine, or anyway a drug for one specific disease for an agent. And a different thing is really about tackling childhood cancers, because we are talking probably about 60 different diseases, you know. And I think that's one comment to make. The other thing, what I would say is like to see the problems, you know, we have to embrace the complexity of the problem and look at different layers, you know, because you have the first layer, let's say, of research. And this is what Andy, for example, alluded to. How can we sort of facilitate exchange of sort of data, ideas at the very first level? Another layer, it's about a regulatory environment. And maybe this is an area where actually can involve government, regulatory bodies. And it goes back to your story. How can we facilitate, you know, a more flexible age of entry into clinical trials? It doesn't make any sense that teenagers are excluded from adult trials. You know, this is just a regulatory thing. It doesn't need an innovation. It doesn't need the investment. It's about, you know, sort of creating the framework for making this possible. And this is something, you know, that can be done. And I think we are moving in that direction. You know, in terms of innovation, I actually think I'm biased, you know, because I've been working in industry all my life. But I think whether we like it or not, new drugs are invented, developed, and commercialized by for-profit companies, by pharma and biotech companies. So we have to create those incentives for these companies to develop, you know, better drugs. And I think it's Simon is spot on, you know, about the incentives like the voucher, priority review vouchers. Now that I set up a biotech company to do precisely that. OncoHeroes Biosciences is a for-profit biotech company. We're based in Boston. And our focus is really to develop only drugs for pediatric cancer. And we are talking to investors all the time. We are mission driven. I'm not doing this for money. You know, it's not because I want to get rich, but I want to solve the problem, at least to contribute to solve the problem. But we have to go in front of investor with a credible story. And so how can we generate return for investment for that? Clearly, we want to develop drugs, but that's one area. And there could be maybe more creative ways. I mean, the priority review voucher is a great thing, but maybe we could come up with more ideas. And, you know, I have ideas. Maybe one day I'll write them down. I'll make some proposals. But, you know, but I think it's good if it also, the proposal come from let's say from the parents, from the nonprofit sector, because we all have to work together. You know, not a single player really can solve the problem alone. So
yeah. So just in terms of that, because something we talked about just before we came on, Simon, you were saying about there is a lot of pressure on the patient, because, you know, obviously rare cancers affect all ages, on the patient or on the parent to kind of drive this work. Do you think that's just something we all accept and that just has to happen, or do you think there should be a driver from somewhere else?
Angela's got a hand up.
Sorry.
No, that's absolutely fine. No, did you want to answer the question first, and then
you can.
It was just about the comments from Cesare. It strikes me that there needs to be a new look on this, because I feel that for kind of around 10 years now, I've been involved in this parent and public involvement world, and it seems like we just have the same conversations over and over again. And I really do think that it needs a new approach, and it needs a kind of helicopter view. And I think child health as a whole kind of area needs to be prioritized globally. I think the issue of making sure that our children are healthy and can survive and can grow into adults across rare diseases, including cancers and other diseases, all needs to kind of come together. and it's almost as if we need to raise the voice of that on a more global level. And I feel that by doing that, that's the way that we're going to achieve more recognition for childhood cancers, more importance, because then people will see child health and our children as the future. Because we can shout all we want about childhood cancer and we can say how important it is, but for the actual public to acknowledge that it's an issue that needs to be sorted, they have to be able to relate to this issue. So I think by taking a step back and almost thinking, how can we raise this on a global level first of all, might be quite helpful as a new direction maybe.
It's so interesting, Angela. But so what would that look like though? I mean, because Simon, you both seem to be saying a similar thing here, but what is that?
I mean, one of the things, just following on from the initial question as well, about the fact that, so much of rare cancer, so much of the rare cancer drive has come from really the legacy of dead children, which is a horrible thing to say, but it's the reality. And it's those voices that are echoed from those children in the parents and the families who are striving to do something better for the people that are still battling with those same problems. And so, and yet, most of those are kind of working, they're working from their bedroom, unpaid, whilst they've got other jobs and looking after the rest of their family. So really, that needs a significant uplift to enable them to become a common voice, because all they can think about, and quite naturally so, is, I want to deal with the cancer that is dealt with, that my son or daughter died of, because that's where my fight is, and that's what I want to try and do. And you want to enable that to happen, but at the same time, you want their voices to become a collective. And we need to give that a collective voice, which actually starts to become, because it could be a very strong force. I think it could be a really strong force if you had that happening, that support enabling people to speak loudly at a global level. But then there are all the other components, and you've got, what's interesting when you go around this kind of world of rare cancers is there's a ton of people that want to do good. You've got researchers, the PhD student that Andy talked about, who wants to do good. The university that wants to support a particular area of research. Even in the pharmaceutical industries, people that want to do good, but the system doesn't allow that to happen. So I'm all for kind of like taking it to the highest level that we can, and starting to think about how we can facilitate a collaboration that would make sense. And it's a bit like, I suppose, the concept that Biden picked up in the Obama time of a cancer moonshot. You kind of need that moonshot approach, I think, to pediatric and rare cancer to make it work. So you're really getting the best minds from all the best places to collaborate and work out, well, what should we do next? How do we move this whole thing forward and save those lives, which are our future? That's the motivation. This is our future, and it's going to cost us, same as public education costs us, but let's do it.
So, because that's such a great point, what Angela was saying is about that same conversation, and it's probably why I stepped out of that kind of, because I stepped out of the main arena of where some of the work was going on about trying to get these initiatives off the ground, because it did feel like the same conversation. And so it's why I've been very attracted to kind of an innovation company and using some kind of technology to kind of do something that has impact. And I can see how that would work, but what could we, so anybody watching this thinking, yeah, this is great, really great, understand what people are saying, but I want to do something, what could they do?
You could start in the simplest way of just finding out who is out there that wants to do something. I mean, that in itself is an exercise. Who out there it wants to be part of this story, and just collecting the data about who wants to make a difference and why, and finding and bringing that together, I think in itself would be a valuable thing to do, because I think we'd start to see the connecting points. and we'd start to see where there are potentials for collaboration and potentials for generating more investment and more progress. We don't know what we don't know. That's kind of like where we're at.
Yeah.
We don't know what we don't, and there's a lot that we don't know. And every time I go out there and talk to different people, suddenly, I find some other cancer charity that's driven by parents who've lost a child, who are working from their back bedroom, but they've actually hit on something really interesting. And if everybody else knew about that, then we could start to do something which would help them, but also help many more people.
Yeah.
So I think that, that bringing together, that sense of community is what, and certainly the advocacy groups are the strongest people to be able to do that.
Yeah. So Cesare, and that, sorry, Angela. No,
sorry, I was just going to say that I've actually been leading a European project that's kind of based around the same thing. So at the moment it's still in its infancy and I'm just still trying to collect the data, but what we're trying to do is identify people from around Europe, so survivors, parents, or carers, or children that can take part in research or asking about research, and putting them onto a database alongside professionals in the area of paediatric oncology. So similar to kind of like the speed dating or matching service.
Yeah.
So that when there's researchers or when there's a project and they're looking for people to be part of their research project, that they're able to go onto this European database and access information, so they can have a contact from each country. Even if that person can't actually take part, they can then link them to other groups within their country where they might be able to find somebody who can then take part. So that's one of my big aims for this year, is to try and get that off the ground and get that working, because I know what it wants to look like.
And so where would people find out more about that, Angela?
So I'm working with CCI Europe, who is Childhood Cancer International, the Europe division. So I'm working together with them at the moment, and also had conversations with CR UK and CCLG. So I'm just trying to, what I've done is I've created an online questionnaire asking about involvement in childhood cancer research, which has been sent out to, I think, about 26 countries across Europe. So I have a lot of data about what's going on and the level of training that people have, how they can work with the parents and the public. So I just need to put all of that together, which unfortunately, as Simon was saying, I'm doing in my back bedroom in my own time. So so hopefully I'll have some more information about it. I'm hoping at the international conference, the SciOp conference in Valencia that's coming up, I'm hoping to be able to present my idea and what I've done so far there. So yeah, hopefully I'll have some more information soon.
Fantastic, really great. And that kind of getting the data, the collaboration, all those kind of things, and so difficult to do, but so valuable. So thank you so much. I have two final questions for all of you. The first thing is, if you had a magic wand and you could just change one thing that would really have impact and make a difference. And second thing, what do you think will happen in this world in the next 5 years? Are you hopeful, pessimistic? What are the key things you think will happen? So Cesare, you first.
Yeah, I know. I knew that we don't want to start. Well, I think it's because I'm now in the sort of biotech world, So I would like to see maybe sort of better incentives for companies like us, to develop drugs for kids with cancer, for rare cancers in general. And I think what I would like to see, because I kind of have two hats, So I'm in the biotech sector, but I'm also the trustee of a childhood cancer charity. I would like to see more collaborations among the different charities. I mean, because we keep talking about collaboration. It's kind of a magic word. Everybody's in favor of collaborations, but in practice, we don't see this happening all the time. And I've got all sorts of horror stories about charities. I wouldn't say fighting each other, but really competing in an area which should be non-competitive just by definition. I think it's if I put on my sort of non-profit hat, I would like charities maybe think more strategically, think about different business model. The way I see things, charities very often, they are focused on doing things right, but they should be focused on doing the right things. Just think about, the way they do things, because, if you keep doing the same things and you get the same results, you're never going to change things. You have to change your way of working. And one way that I'd like to see is I would like to see the venture philanthropy model being adopted more widely. So charities working alongside biotech companies. Biotechs are not the dark side. They are working in a different environment. So we need to work together, because only by working together we can achieve things. For the biotech sector, well, I would like to see maybe better incentives, but that shouldn't be an excuse, because even with the incentives that we have right now, we can still achieve things. And in terms of forecast, I don't know, usually things go both ways. They get better in one way, they get worse. I tend to be optimistic, so I tend to see the glass half full. And I think we will improve on things, and maybe in 5 years' time we will have at least one success story to tell.
Fantastic, thank you, Angela. So you could change something now.
If I could wave a magic wand, I think that I would like to see that no child dies of cancer. I think that's everybody's kind of ultimate goal in this area. I just don't think that we should ever get to the point where we have to say goodbye to our children. So yeah, for me, that would be the major thing if I could wave my wand. I think over the next 5 years, I would definitely like to see some sort of resource where people who are in the position where they're in relapse or second relapse and they're desperately searching for information, where they can just find that information quickly, because it takes up so much time. And it's precious time that that once it's happened to you, you just think, why did I spend all of that time trying to look for something when I could have been spending more time with my child and making happy memories? And I just think if that was easier to do, even if it can't save your child, at least that you've tried your best, you've talked to people, you've done everything that you possibly can, just to preserve that time that you have with your child.
Yeah, thank you very much, Angela. So Andy.
I was going to pick up the point made about collaboration, really, and I was going to have a dig at my my employees up until 4 years ago, and that's universities, and they could do a lot actually to improve the value of collaboration. Yeah. So they've got a very ambivalent view. So they say, oh yes, we like the idea of collaborating across the world and sharing ideas, but we need to know exactly what contribution you as an individual made. Where were you on this particular paper? Where were you? Were you the driving force? And if you weren't the driving force, then why weren't you? And if you weren't, we're not interested in promoting you. So that makes people who've got really good intentions do bad things, which is keep things to themselves and use sharp elbows and all those sort of things that you don't want to see in academia. And so it's a question of somehow how can we really incentivize that? If we pick up your remark about COVID and we're picking up there, COVID was so good because the Chinese published the sequence within days of finding it. All right. Without the sequence of the virus, we would be nowhere near where we are now. So that was a great example. They could have sat on it and said, oh, I've got a nice paper waiting here. No, they didn't do that. It hasn't been wonderful all the way through, but actually, by and large, there's been that collaboration driven by the urgency of the situation. So it's picking up an aspect of that. In terms of what's going to happen in the next 5 years, I thought I'd talk about something kind of a bit scientific. And I think the idea of the basket trial. So this is a trial where you take people with the same mutations but in different diseases and start treating those in a single trial. And I think there could be a huge incentive for this, because secretly tucked away, because it's been such a hectic time, there was a really exciting scientific discovery. And this was the computer prediction of a protein structure from its DNA sequence. I'll unpick that slightly. So when a protein is in a cell, it's got a three-dimensional structure. And you can't predict using current models what that structure is going to look like. But using AI, there's a company that's managed to do that. And so now they can take a sequence and they can, with a reasonable amount of assurance, decide what a three-dimensional structure looks like. Why does that matter to cancer? Because a lot of cancer drugs are developed with a structure in mind. They develop something which is going to put us a very particular spanner in a part of the work which stops that particular protein doing something which it shouldn't be doing. And that could lead to a whole load of new drugs relatively quickly and relatively cheaply. So that's really exciting. And that could happen over the next 5 years.
Fantastic. And it's, yeah, great, Andy. And that idea of basket trials and kind of personalized medicine seems to be a really, really important way forward. That, and I certainly have with Chloe, who had a Ewing sarcoma, had a lot in common with some lung cancers, and putting that together into just seemed to make such sense. We didn't get on the trial, but that was a whole other issue. Simon, magic wand.
Yeah. Actually, I was asked this question once by Professor Mike Richards, who used to be the cancer czar, and I said to him that actually I would like to prescribe every young person with cancer an intelligent, pushy mother. Because they never give up.
That's right, Angela, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And you know, and it's true, they've become the advocates. But I suppose, you know, what I would like, as you know, Debbie, I hate systemic blocks.
Yeah, yeah.
I think that if I had a magic wand, it would be to break down those systemic blocks in all areas. You know, for me, you know, it's unacceptable that a PhD student can't do a study on a rare cancer because it doesn't fit the model of what the university needs to produce at the end of it. That's a systemic block, which is, you know, which is not, you know, acceptable. And I think you see the same in many other situations, the regulatory system around the pharmaceutical industry, how collaborations can take place, commercial competition, or, you know, the way government looks at these things. So for me, it's about breaking down the systemic blocks would be the most helpful thing, and that's the magic wand that I would like to wave. I think we're going into a big sort of global financial challenge at the moment, which worries me that could stall investment. But I do think, you know, that we're at probably the most exciting time for science for many years, and I think some the stuff that Andy was describing, and the stuff that the new biotechs are doing, that Cesare was talking about, you know, that I think there is huge hope in there that we will find some stuff which will be really, really helpful to a range of cancers. But I would like to just sort of end to say that I think, and this is as much a gut feeling as it is knowing that this is the case, but I believe that if we tackle rare disease, we will learn more for common disease than we will the other way around. And we're continually investing so much in the kind of Me Too world of drug development for common disease, and I'm talking about all diseases, not just cancer, that we're missing a trick here, because I think that we will learn much more that will be helpful to everybody by understanding rare disease, and it's the rarity which has the secrets in it, which we will find, which will make a difference. So I am hopeful about that. I think there's some really strong, you know, the genetic stuff, the personalized medicine is going to throw up some very interesting things that will help, you know, a number of diseases, not just cancer.
Lovely. Thank you so much, all of you. And just from the purpose of the podcast is I'm just a mere journalist by training. So believe passionately that just using this technology to share our thoughts and just maybe that helps make some connections, so we can have different conversations, maybe connecting people up, you know, showcasing things that people are doing. So thank you so much for giving your time today to the podcast. And I'd like to say finally that I would just really like to thank Angela and Cesare for sharing the story of Bethany and Lara, and how just fantastic that, you know, you're still here trying to do stuff in their names. And I know for myself, it kind of maybe helps keep our children's memory alive in some ways, and to keep saying their names is feels really important to me. So thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank you.
Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thanks.